Hi everyone, this is Glenda Ganzon and welcome to my Human Anatomy and Physiology class. And for today's video, I'm going to discuss the different accessory structures of the skin. So stay tuned. Accessory structures of the skin include hair, nails, sweat glands, and sebaceous glands. And these structures embryologically originate from the epidermis and can extend down through the dermis into the hypodermis. The first structure of the skin, which is the hair, is a keratinous filament growing out of the epidermis. It is primarily made of dead keratinized cells. Strands of the hair originate in an epidermal penetration of the dermis called hair follicle. The hair shaft is the part of the hair not anchored to the follicle, and much of this is exposed to the skin surface. The rest of the hair, which is anchored in the follicle, lies below the surface of the skin and is referred to as the hair root. So the hair root ends deep in the dermis at the hair bulb, and it includes a layer of mitotically active basal cells called the hair matrix. So the hair bulb surrounds the hair papilla, which is made of connective tissue and contains blood capillaries and nerve endings from the dermis. So just as the basal layer of the epidermis form the layers of the epidermis that get pushed to the surface of the dead skin on the surface sheds, the basal cells of the hair bulb divide and push cells outward in the hair root and shaft as the hair grows. So the medulla forms the central core of the hair, which is surrounded by the cortex. The cortex is a layer of compressed keratinized cells that is covered by an outer layer of very hard keratinized cells known as the cuticle. So these layers are depicted in a longitudinal cross-section of the hair follicle, although not all hair has a medulla layer. This picture shows a cross-section of the hair follicle. Basal cells of the hair matrix in the center differentiates into cell of the inner root sheath. Basal cells also at the base of the hair root form the outer root sheath. So hair texture, whether it is straight or curly, is determined by the shape and structure of the cortex, and to the extent that it is present, the medulla. And the shape and structure of these layers are in turn determined by the shape of the hair follicle. So hair growth begins with the production of keratinocytes by the basal cells of the hair bulb. As new cells are deposited at the hair bulb, the hair shaft is pushed through the follicle toward the surface. So keratinization is completed as the cells are pushed to the skin surface to form a shaft of hair that is externally visible. And the external hair is completely dead and composed entirely of keratin. So for this reason, our hair does not have sensation. Furthermore, you can cut your hair or shave without damaging the hair structure because the cut is superficial, and most chemical hair removers also act superficially. However, electrolysis and yanking both attempt to destroy the hair bulb, so hair cannot grow. The wall of the hair follicle is made of 3 concentric layers of cells. The cell of the internal root sheath surround the root of the growing hair and extend just up to the hair shaft. They are derived from the basal cells of the hair matrix. The external root sheath, which is an extension of the epidermis, encloses the hair root. It is made of basal cells at the base of the hair root and tends to be more keratinous in the upper regions. The glossomembrane is a thick, clear connective tissue sheath covering the hair root, connecting to the tissue of the dermis. So hair serves a variety of functions, including protection, sensory input, thermoregulation, and communication. For example, hair on the head protects the skull from the sun. The hair in the nose and ears and around the eyes, including the eyelashes, defends the body by trapping and excluding dust particles that may contain allergens and microbes. Hair of the eyebrows also prevents sweat and other particles from dipping into the eyes and bothering the eyes. Also, hair has a sensory function due to the sensory innervation by a hair root plexus surrounding the base of each hair follicle. So hair is extremely sensitive to the air movement or other disturbances in the environment, much more so than the skin surface. So this feature is also useful for the detection of the presence of insects or other potentially damaging substances on the skin surface. And each hair root is connected to the smooth muscle called arrector pili or arrector pili that contracts in response to nerve signals from the sympathetic nervous system, making the external hair shaft stand up. The primary purpose for this is to trap a layer of air to add insulation, and this is visible in humans as goosebumps and even more obvious in animals, such as when a frightened cat raises its fur. Of course, this is much more obvious in organisms with a heavier coat than most humans, such as dogs and cats and some other animals. So let's move on to the topic of hair growth. Hair grows and is eventually shed and replaced by new hair. This occurs in three phases. The first is the anagen phase, and during which cells divide rapidly at the root of the hair, pushing the hair shaft up and out. The length of this phase is measured in layers for several years, typically from 2 to 7 years. The next phase is the catagen, and it lasts only 2 to 3 weeks and marks a transition from the hair follicle's active growth. And the last phase is the telogen. So in this phase, the hair follicle is at rest and no new growth occurs. So at the end of this phase, which lasts about 2 to 4 months, another anagen phase begins. So the basal cells in the hair matrix then produce a new hair follicle which pushes the old hair out as the growth cycle repeats itself. So hair typically grows at the rate of 0.3 millimeters per day during anagen phase. On average, 50 hairs are lost and replaced per day. Could you imagine that? So hair loss occurs where there is more shed than what is replaced and can happen due to the hormonal or dietary changes. Hair loss also can be or can result from the aging process or the influence of the hormones. For the hair color, similar to the skin, hair gets its color from the pigment melanin, and it is produced by melanocytes in the hair papilla. Different hair color results from the differences in the type of melanin, which is genetically determined. So, as a person ages, the melanin production decreases and the hair tends to lose its color and becomes gray or white. The next accessory structure of the skin are the nails. So the nail bed is a special structure of the epidermis that is bound at the tips of our fingers and toes. The nail body is formed on the nail bed and protects the tips of our fingers and toes as they are the farthest extremities and the parts of the body that experience the maximum mechanical stress. In addition, the nail body forms a back support for picking up small objects with the fingers. So the nail body is composed of densely packed dead keratinocytes. The epidermis in this part of the body has evolved as a specialized structure upon which nails can form. So the nail body forms at the nail root, which has a matrix of proliferating cells from stratum basale that enables the nail to grow continuously. So the lateral nail fold overlaps the nail on the sides, helping to anchor the nail body, and the nail fold that meets the proximal end of the nail body forms the nail cuticle. It is also called as the eponychium. The nail bed is rich in blood vessels, making it appear pink, except at the base, where a thick layer of epithelium over the nail matrix form a crescent-shaped regions, which is called the lanula. Lanula means the little moon. So the area beneath the free edge of the nail farthest from the cuticle is called the hyponychium. It consists of a thickened layer of the stratum corneum. Let's move on to the next accessory structure of the skin, which is the sweat glands. So when the body becomes warm, sudoriferous glands produce sweat to cool the body. So sweat glands develop from epidermal projection into the dermis and are classified as merocrine glands. That is, the secretions are excreted by exocytosis through a duct without affecting the cells of the gland. There are two types of sweat glands, and each secreting slightly different products. So the first one is the eccrine sweat glands, and this type of sweat glands produce a hypotonic sweat for thermoregulation, and these glands are found all over the skin surface but are especially abundant in or on the palms of the hand, the soles of the feet, and the forehead. And they are coiled glands lying deep in the dermis, with the duct rising up to a pore on the skin surface where the sweat is released. So this type of sweat released by exocytosis, and it is hypotonic and composed mostly of water with some salt, antibodies, traces of metabolic waste, and dermicidin. So dermicidin, an antimicrobial peptide. So eccrine glands are primary component of thermoregulation in humans and thus help to maintain homeostasis. The second type of sweat glands, which is the apocrine sweat gland, is usually associated with the hair follicles in densely hairy areas such as armpits and genital regions. So apocrine sweat glands are larger than eccrine sweat glands and lie deeper in the dermis, sometimes even reaching the hypodermis, with the duct normally emptying into the hair follicle. In addition, water and salts. Apocrine sweat includes organic compounds that make the sweat thicker and subject to bacterial decomposition and subsequent smell. So the release of this sweat is under both nervous and hormonal control and plays a role in the poorly understood human phenomenon response, and most commercial antiperspirant use an aluminum-based compound as their primary active ingredient to stop sweat. So when an antiperspirant enters the sweat gland duct, the aluminum-based compounds precipitate into the change in the pH and form a physical block in the duct, which prevents the sweat from coming out of the pore. And the last accessory structure of the skin is the sebaceous glands. So a sebaceous gland is a type of oil gland that is found all over the body and helps to lubricate and waterproof the skin and hair. Most sebaceous glands also are associated with hair follicles, so they generate and excrete sebum, a mixture of lipids, onto skin surface, thereby naturally lubricating the dry and dead layer of keratinized cells of the stratum corneum, keeping it pliable. So the fatty acids of sebum also have antibacterial properties and prevent water loss from the skin in low humidity environments. This secretion of sebum is stimulated by hormones many of which do not become active until puberty. The sebaceous glands are relatively inactive during childhood. So that ends my lecture about the accessory structures of the skin, which are the hair, nails, sweat glands, and sebaceous glands. And if you have any question, please write it in the comment section down below and I'll be glad to answer them all. And once again, I would like to thank you all for watching this video and for listening to my discussion. Until my next video, bye everyone!